to episode 428 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Michael O'Malley,
and Reid Ramsey.
Today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we're going to conclude our Horror for Kids series with 2022's Wendell Wild, which is now on Netflix. So if you haven't watched it, pause this right now. Pop that Netflix button on.
They're actually advertising it too, which is surprising. I opened my Netflix app and it was the first thing it showed me.
They're getting ads in this thing too, so it's all over the place.
Cinematary, sponsored by Netflix.
This is sponsored by Monkey Paw Production.
You know, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Speaking of lights, Michael.
Wow.
Alley-oop. Yeah, so movies we saw in part 1. I've been watching a lot of good movies recently, but I saw one bad movie recently, and that is Lightyear, the Disney Pixar film from earlier this year, that, to quote, well, maybe not quote, to paraphrase the opening title card, this is the movie that Andy, what's his name, saw in 1995.
What is his name?
Does Andy have a last name?
I don't think he has a last name.
I'll look for you. I got you. Continue.
That Andy of Toy Story fame watched in 1995 that made him fall in love with the Buzz Lightyear character so much that he was willing to replace Woody with a Buzz Lightyear toy. And so, over the next 100 minutes, you see what movie could have so impacted this child that they would convince their parents to buy a Space Ranger toy. And this movie sucks. So, like all children...
How does the CG of this movie exist in 1995 while Toy Story looks like Toy Story?
So here's my thought, is that Toy Story is in and of itself a CGI world. And so it's not actually CG in the Toy Story world, right? It would have been...
That's a good thought.
This movie's already weird on several fronts, but it would have been really weird if they had done like live action.
A live action.
But okay, so like all children who are 6 or however old Andy's supposed to be at the time, like he has terrible taste in movies because this movie's terrible. There's a few reasons why this movie is terrible. First of all, it's just the character of Buzz Lightyear is a complete nothing. In the original Toy Story, the joke of Buzz Lightyear is that he is a generic like ripoff of like Buck Rogers, Star Wars, like he's just like a generic mashup of like all this stuff, you know. And like when Woody reads like, you know, the side of the box, it's like basically like copy pasted from like the Star Wars opening crawl, right? Like that's like part of the joke of Buzz Lightyear is that he thinks he's so important, but 1, he's a toy, and 2, he's not a particularly notable toy, right? And this movie is supposed to be like, you know, introducing this character as he would actually be narratively present. So he's not a fake Space Ranger anymore. He's a real Space Ranger. And he is boring. My daughter is crying in the other room. Don't worry, my wife has her, but I'm just saying, you might pick it up on the audio.
She's also watching Lightyear.
Just saying. She's crying because Lightyear is not very interesting. So like, you have a movie in which we're supposed to be invested in 2 characters, Buzz Lightyear, and then Buzz Lightyear's partner, supervisor or something like this. I don't remember like the connection like specifically in terms of rank. And what happens is Buzz Lightyear and this other person get stranded on this planet. And they have to try to escape the planet, but they're having such a hard time escaping the planet that they basically end up like establishing a colony on the planet until they can like rebuild their like intergalactic ship to escape. And eventually, like Buzz Lightyear's partner becomes gets a family and everything on this colony and kind of gets established, whereas Buzz Lightyear has remained driven on like, I'm going to escape this planet. And through circumstances that aren't important to talk about, like Buzz Lightyear eventually like tries so hard to escape the planet that like he fixes the hyperdrive, but it's not quite working right. And so like he goes at the speed of light or near the speed of light. And because of relativity, time dilates and he shoots into the future. And when he lands again, it is like 100 years in the future or something like that. And everyone he knows is dead. And it's just like the great grandchildren of the people he knew. And so the emotional arc that he's supposed to be going through is like learning to deal with like loss. Like he has to go through like Interstellar style and look at all these logs and watch as his like old coworker like grows old and eventually dies and stuff. And so we're supposed to be, moved and invested in this idea that Buzz Lightyear is a man out of time, having to deal with like the people he knew are no longer around, and also having to deal with like how to reconnect with these people who know who he is as like almost a legend, because he just disappeared because he was time traveling for like 100 years. But the problem is Buzz Lightyear is not an interesting vessel for this character arc because he is so boringly written. He's voiced by Chris Evans, and I have liked Chris Evans in the past, but he is in like 100% like late period Marvel Captain America mode, where he is just like square jawed and uninteresting in terms of his voice acting, right? It's a complete like blank slate in terms of like voice acting. Like this could be any like square jawed protagonist, and you don't even have to change the script. Or you don't even have to change like the voice acting. Like this could be Captain America, this could be something else. So that's bad. Buzz Lightyear's not an interesting character. The second thing that's bad is that this movie refuses to let us forget that it is tied to Toy Story. And by this, I mean, it not only has that opening title card, which tells you, hey, Andy watched this movie. But
by the way, I'm on the Wikipedia page for this movie, and it does have the title card quoted.
Oh my gosh, please.
To quote it word for word is even funnier. It reads, in 1995, a boy named Andy got a Buzz Lightyear toy for his birthday. Period. It was from his favorite movie. Period. This is that movie.
Yes. It's a real, like, today we call them computers kind of title card.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not only does it give us that title card, but secondly, it refuses to let us forget that it is connected to the Toy Story universe because it keeps quoting Toy Story in the movie. And it makes sense on a certain level to have the Buzz Lightyear character say the lines that like the Buzz Lightyear toy says, like in his like voice box, because presumably that's like lines from the movie or whatever. Like that kind of makes sense in universe. But they quote other things too. Like they quote lines, like whole interactions from like Woody and Buzz. Like the whole, like, remember in Toy Story when Buzz Lightyear wakes up from being in his box and he's on the bed and he's like, Star Command, come in, Star Command. Do you read me? Why won't they answer me? And then he like bounced on the bed. Is like, the terrain seems rather spongy, or something. Like this movie quotes like that whole thing, including up to the point where Woody shows up. But it's not Woody in this movie. It's a different character saying the Woody lines. Where like, Buzz Lightyear's like, there doesn't seem to be any sign of intelligent life anywhere. And then the character pops up is like, hello. And like, he doesn't get it cuts off before it gets to the, like, where Andy's toys, like, lines. But, like, it is a surprising amount of Toy Story dialogue in this, like, one scene. And then that happens multiple times throughout the movie. And it is bizarre. Like, it is deeply bizarre.
There's, like, a fight, and they're like, you've got a friend in me!
Like, it's not quite that, like, dissonant, but it is really, really weird and uncanny, to watch these things be parroted in this movie, because like for the most part this movie is not very connected to the Toy Story mythology, which would make sense because all the toys are from different properties, but also like I don't know, it's so strange to constantly reference the outside, like if we're imagining that this movie came out in 1994 1995 whenever Andy saw this, it is referencing things that happen in the future after this movie was made.
Yeah.
Like that, it simply does not work.
Where those characters are unwittingly just reenacting a script from another movie.
So it like conceptually doesn't work, but moreover, it is distracting as hell. Like it is really, really hard. Like I went into this movie not really expecting it to be very good because like the premise is so batty and just goofy. And it is so obviously like we are trying to maintain the brand of like Buzz Lightyear without having to make another Toy Story movie. Like that is like very like this movie is very nakedly that, like, just from the advertising campaign. So I went into it not expecting it to be good just on that, but I was not expecting like the movie doing two very weird things at the same time, which is one, tying itself so closely to the first Toy Story movie, while two, having nothing at all meaningfully connecting to the first Toy Story movie. It is simply like quoting the first Toy Story movie while otherwise being a movie that has nothing to do with Toy Story. Not any of the themes, not any of the like characters, not even like the character of Buzz Lightyear, like that like kind of diluted arrogance that like the Buzz Lightyear character has in the Toy Story movie that's kind of really funny and is tense. He doesn't even have that. He's like a lot nicer in this. Like he doesn't really even feel like the character that he is when he wakes up as a toy. I'm sorry. You guys can probably hear the baby, right? Well, okay. I promise that she's fine. So at any rate, that's weird and bad of the movie. And like, there's just nothing in the movie that convinces me that like there's no spark of life. Because the movie that this is bad, and also it's conceptually bad in terms of it's just simply brand management. My thought is how this movie came about is that this was a unaffiliated space movie being developed at Pixar. And at a certain point early in the production, they realized this doesn't have enough juice in the tank to be a standalone movie. We got to punch it up somehow. And so they pasted Buzz Lightyear on top of it, because otherwise it doesn't make sense that this is how they would conceptualize like what a Buzz Lightyear movie.
It makes sense to me that they would like start the movie from the ground up as like a brand management move. Like I don't think that Pixar like gets too deep into a movie without there being like an original
What I'm
idea.
saying is the Buzz Lightyear stuff is so superficial. Like if you took out the Toy Story lines and you changed the name of the character from Buzz Lightyear to like, you know, whatever, Captain Smith, Space Voyager, and then like there's a reference to Emperor Zurg that ends up being kind of a fake out, and you could just change the design of him and call him something different, and this would not scan as a Buzz Lightyear character. Like the only thing that makes it a Buzz Lightyear character is obviously he looks like Buzz Lightyear, and then there are those Toy Story quoting lines. Like there is nothing that connects him to the broader, like, I don't know, it just it feels so, I don't know, like there's that scene at the beginning, like the opening scene of Toy Story 2 is purportedly inside the Buzz Lightyear universe, but it's a video game, right? And it has a very particular tone, and like it's kind of like this.
It's cool. I want to watch that movie.
This movie doesn't. This movie just isn't just not that. This movie doesn't even feel like it's that. It doesn't even feel like in the same conversation as that. Like it. I don't know. Like it's really hard to describe, but it quite possibly could have been that they were just like, we need another Buzz Lightyear movie here. Why don't you write a Buzz Lightyear script? Like maybe that's it. But if that's the case, the person who wrote this, or people who wrote this, I can't remember who is responsible, but they didn't do a lot to make it feel like a Buzz Lightyear movie. They were relying on the fact that they quote Buzz Lightyear lines and then that he looks like the Buzz Lightyear toy to carry that idea. I don't know. This movie sucks. I have been a defender of late period Pixar, a moderate defender, and I will say like this is easily their worst movie, like far surpassing Cars 2 or undercutting Cars 2, because there's nothing going on here. It's not even creative visually. The like kind of cool, interesting visual flourishes that the last few Pixar movies have been walked back tremendously, and we're just back in the boring photorealism, but without cool designs. Like even a lot of Pixar movies that are just doing the photorealism thing have like inventive designs for that photorealism to render, and that's not even here.
That's the bummer, because honestly it's not like Pixar's, like we've talked about, Luca and Turning Red are two really good movies.
Oh man. Yeah.
Those are two great animated movies that kind of utilize that. So it's kind of a bummer that they fell back into, let's just slap brand recognition on it and make it.
Not just that. This was the first Pixar movie that's been back in the like theatrical release since the pandemic. Like Luca and Turning Red are like interesting, idiosyncratic movies, and both just got shoveled onto Disney Plus. Whereas this thing, which I think pretty severely underperformed at the box office, to which I say, for once, audiences made the right choice. I don't know, like it's dispiriting and a bummer. Like that. This movie is just kind of a shell for like a really it's not even interesting fan service. That's what I'm saying. If you want to make a fan servicey, maintain the Buzz Lightyear brand, it's not even doing a good job of that. So don't see Lightyear. Go and watch Turning Red or Luca.
That's true. Go to Disney Plus, and if you see Lightyear, get the hell out of here.
No. Go to Google, type in Turning Red online stream free, and find the 123movies.com ones, because Disney does not deserve your Disney Plus subscription. They're not even doing neutrality with it. They're doing evil with it.
Pro pirating this podcast. All right. Well, if you do that, you might get a ticket in a way from the government, but that ticket isn't to paradise like this one Reid's about to give us.
I don't even know how to follow that up. Okay, Ticket to Paradise. That was really good. I wasn't expecting it. I thought you had really thrown all your eggs in the light basket. But weird metaphor. But okay, Ticket to Paradise is the new George Clooney and Julia Roberts movie, which, as I may say later, if these two just made a movie once a year together, good or bad, I don't really care. I think it would be good for society. They could make a Lightyear even, and it might still be overall good.
Let's calm down there, Reid. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. But the two of they're just really fun. But basically, the premise is that they've been divorced for 20 years. They were barely married for 5 years, had a daughter. They hate each other. Julia Roberts jokes that she tries to never even be in the same time zone as George Clooney's character, who I don't remember their names. I probably won't refer to them as their characters' names. But she jokes that they don't even get in the same time zone, but they have to go to their daughter's graduation. Basically, is the first time they interact in a long time. And then their daughter, the plot is really confusing, but her daughter is leaving law school and going on a trip to Bali. And while she's in Bali, this is Caitlin Dever, by the way, who's good in it. But while she's in Bali, she falls in love with this mysterious Balinese man, and decides to get married in 4 days' time, as all these things always go. And so George Clooney and Julia Roberts' characters are flying there to quote unquote support her, but also try to sabotage the wedding together. They're really with each other on this one. But basically, if that premise doesn't sell you, that it's just all these people in a beautiful location, it is genuinely funny, and I think it's helpful to know that the movie's way goofier than I expected. And it made sense at the end when I saw who directed it, who's not a name everyone's gonna be familiar with, but Ol Parker. He directed the great Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, which is a really goofy movie, and only works if you really buy into it. And this movie's pretty similar, I think. It's very silly, and George Clooney is not playing he's not even playing the kind of I don't know, how would you even describe kind of George Clooney the last 10 years? Just kind of smarmy. He is a little smarmy, but he's also just a really goofy dad, and that's just kind of enjoyable because he's really easy to laugh at, and you can also
He's just been playing Mr. Fox.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. He's kind of just been playing Mr. Fox. But here it's he's gone. This is closer to Burn After Reading than Mr. Fox. Sorry, I almost dropped the name of the podcast I had years ago. Burn After Watching.
Oh my gosh, drop.
Wow, really throwback there.
Shout out to Burn After Watching.
Yeah, they don't exist anymore. So this is a little closer to.
Search Apple Podcasts for Burn After Watching, everyone.
Yeah, I think another like random. I think someone else took the name over after like expired or whatever. I don't know. I search it every couple of years, but basically, he's closer to like his Burn After Reading self, and Julia Roberts is like the way you always see her essentially. Especially like she's more like what you see in, like the Ocean's movie. She's just like really fed up with him, like. But you can tell they have like really good chemistry still because that's like how they are as actors. Sorry, my phone's getting blown up. Apparently, someone's trying to sign into my mom's account or something. So
They heard about Burn After Watching and they had to, get in the back door.
but
I just have to point out real quickly that old Parker
fan
is
mail's coming
also
in.
was married to Thandie Newton.
I had no idea.
Like, what are we? Like, I just like look. I looked. So I'm like, who's old Parker? Director of Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. Also, Thandie Newton's former spouse.
I like that anyone's first name is
Ol.
O.
Like it's
Parker.
it's like an old man in like a country town. Like, oh, that's old Parker over there. Instead, he's a British man.
And I mean, he kind of directs as if he's like that guy, the crazy guy in the town.
I'm old Parker.
But literally, his name popped up on the screen like after the honest. I won't ruin anything for anyone, but like the silliest moment in the movie is actually like literally the final frame. The movie like really delves into sentimentality maybe a little too much throughout, but then like in the end it just fully commits to like goofy, these people are all fake, this is all fake, like just enjoy this weird experience we're on in this movie. And I think I prefer that a lot of times to the sentimentality.
I think it's really unfortunate that George Clooney was like in ER and had to be like sultry and sexy when he possibly could have been a reincarnate of Cary Grant, and that would have been wonderful.
Yeah.
I know. Only the Coen brothers seem to have cracked that code, I think.
Like just think of how like he's like super handsome plus super funny. Like he could have been like Cary Grant, like late 20s, 30s, 40s era Cary Grant, just like good, solid. Like this type of movie sounds like something where it's like, yeah, just slap two likable people in it.
Well, it definitely also like it has a lot of those kind of screwball tones as well. I would never say like fully goes into that. I wish it did. That would be my.
Oh, Barker doesn't have that screwball.
It's a good screwball premise.
Yeah. But I wish it went into it more and just like really kind of went full-fledged screwball comedy instead of like a semi-conventional rom-com that's really enjoyable to watch, which is like where I landed. Like I really, really did enjoy it, and I mean the sentimentality worked on me at least. Like I was at least invested enough to where like I was tearing up at different moments. Like I really, I mean it is an enjoyable movie. I would highly recommend, although critics seem to be really disliking it. So I don't know what that says about me.
Hey, don't listen to the critics. They're also saying that Lightyear might be woke.
That's true. I've heard that. I've heard
it too.
It is not. I was nearly asleep in the movie.
Right back to Lightyear.
Ticket to Paradise. In theaters now.
I don't have a whole lot to say. It's just a very, very pretty, fun, enjoyable movie. The romance works.
Sometimes we need that.
I'd recommend if you just want like a good kind of escape movie.
I don't really want to. I don't mean to like bring us back to Lightyear, but I totally forgot to tell y'all what Andy's last name is.
He has a canon last name,
and how disappointing it is.
Oh.
His name is actually Andrew Andy Davis.
Wait. Is Andy like in quotation marks, like it's his like a nickname, or is that
it's
his
Andrew Davis?
Okay, so it's not like his middle name is
Davis.
Andy and his first name is Andrew.
No, Andrew Davis.
Andrew Davis.
How much more disappointing can a name be?
Andrew said something that made me interested to look up Chris Evans' age for some reason, or maybe something happened where I was like, how old would Chris Evans be if like this was all real and he really was in this movie? Anyone have any guesses how old he'd be in 1995?
I don't know, because he was in the earliest Chris Evans I can think of is he's in Not Another Teen Movie, right? And that's like early 2000s. Is that?
All I know is he's 41.
In
He's
1995.
possibly dating a 25-year-old.
I think he would be 20.
Whew.
No. 15.
Woo! All right. Well.
Yeah, for real. She couldn't have seen Lightyear.
Yikes.
Okay.
Someone who was
He would have been
not born
14.
in
That was a lot there.
1995.
14.
Some lady named Alba Baptista, a Portuguese actress.
Wait. 14?
I mean,
Maybe not.
okay.
Who can say?
Yeah, like he's also probably a CIA operative, so
100%. Y'all probably saw the memes of like when the Buzz Light. I'm sorry, this is another Lightyear thing, but when Lightyear first came out, like when the trailer came out, like all the memes about like Buzz Lightyear looks like he turned off his body camera, or like Buzz Lightyear looks like he.
anyway, so
Yeah. Pretty good.
I just Andrew Davis, y'all. Andrew Davis. I don't have a good transition here, so I'm going to talk about City Slickers. City Slickers is a movie that was actually made in the 90s. It's 91, so Andy possibly could have seen it. We don't know.
As a wee lad.
At one point, Andrew Davis's father.
And then he bought his Billy Crystal action figure.
Yeah.
Andy would have been so much cooler, honestly, if he had seen City Slickers.
Can you imagine what would have happened?
What if Toy Story was about Woody having to like have a battle of wits with a Billy Crystal action
Oh my
figure?
gosh.
I would watch that
That's a
remake.
free idea for you there, Pixar, if you want to run with that.
There's a better way to brand manage Toy Story for sure.
I'm not sure any of the Pixar execs made it past the piracy ad in the middle.
They're just busy like on their phones, like contacting their CIA connections.
You gotta
Chris
give him.
Evans, we have a job for you.
And he's over there like, sorry, I'm banging my daughter's friend. So,
Oh.
so City Slickers. City Slickers. Came out in 91. I need to watch. There's a sequel to this as well. But the premise is you have three. I don't know I forgot what their businesses are. Well, Billy Crystal like sells the ads at a radio station or something. I don't know. But they're like business people in New York, and they're just like, why does our life suck? We don't have any fun in our lives anymore. And so that's my Billy Crystal impression.
I expect you to break that out several more times in this review.
What's the deal? But that impression just turns into like Jerry Seinfeld. It's like, what's the deal with Ovaltine? But yeah, so he and his friend, these two other friends of his, they have vacations where they go and do like insane stuff to kind of like revitalize their will to live or whatever. So the movie opens and you're in Pantalona at the running of the bulls, and like Billy Crystal and Bruno Kirby and Daniel Stern are running of the bulls. So this one, they decide to take this. At this point, Billy Crystal is kind of like a little bit, unhappy with his job. His kind of, figuring through, really kind of struggling at home. His son is Jake Gyllenhaal, by the way, which is crazy. Like first.
How old
role
is
for
Jake Gyllenhaal in this?
It's his first role in a movie.
Oh my gosh.
But he's not doing great at home, and so at the same time, Bruno Kirby's character has just recently gotten married, and then Daniel Stern's character is getting a divorce from his wife, and so they're like, we got to get away, and they decide to go on this Wild West experience vacation where they don't say where, but it seems like Arizona, New Mexico, something like that. And they have like a handler who teaches them how to kind of work as a ranch hand, and then they're all going to collectively take this group of cattle from one point to another place, and that's going to be like the experience. And so the majority of the first part of the movie is just like them learning how to. It's a lot of slapstick of like, I don't know, these New York city slickers, these New York people, or that they don't know how to do the way of the cowboy and things like that. But it does open this, like, I think he won. I'm not gonna look it up. I'm pretty sure though he won or was nominated for an Oscar. Jack Palance plays the kind of veteran, old time, like looks like he's on a cigarette ad, cowboy who just kind of threatens them just with his presence because he's like the peak in their minds of masculinity. But it's overall it's pretty funny. You get into like the actual journey of taking the cows places, but it's good. It's peak, it's kind of Billy Crystal in kind of his peak time of making movies. Bruno Kirby I always am entertained with. He's just a real nice, rest in peace, a nice, side character for the lead character. Aces in When Harry Met Sally, Aces in Good Morning Vietnam. He's Aces here also, just great. And then Daniel Stern kind of gives the most interesting performance of the three. Is just kind of like this semi-unhinged guy who also is like a little bit suicidal. It gets way more kind of dark and like internal kind of processing grief and aging, and like it gets way more into that than you kind of expect from like a hee-haw 90s comedy, which is actually, and I think it lands better than you think it would. But yeah, overall pretty solid. I think this is good Billy Crystal. It's better than like now where he kind of just the stuff he's put out later is more my time has passed and these kids don't get it. This one's pretty good. It's on Netflix right now, but City Slickers, if you want like a nice little fun comedy, it's the way to go. I'm trying to look at who else is in this. Yeah, it's good. The other one I wanted to talk about is Werewolves Within. This one came out last year. It's based on a VR game by Ubisoft.
Which is, of course, just based on a, game people have played just out loud forever. Werewolf.
Wait, so the game is the adaptation of Werewolf? Like the the party game? I don't think I made that connection when we were talking earlier.
Yeah, I don't know either, but it does start with this big old Ubisoft logo. Ubisoft.
In some ways, this is just like Lightyear. Like, this is that game.
This is the game. This is the game that you watched that inspired you to play werewolf, or that inspired you to like love werewolves or something.
In 2011, Andy Davis was a freshman in college. He spent many a night playing a game.
A boy named
Andy was a freshman in college.
Yeah. This is that movie. So the plot of this is there's this proposed pipeline that is creating. First Sam Richardson's character moves into the small town. He's going to be the local U.S. Ranger for the town. And when he gets there, there's this proposed pipeline that's kind of split the town. Half of them are pro pipeline. Half of them, don't want it to ruin the environment and their small town aesthetic. And so then, you have a snowstorm hits. During the snowstorm, something mysterious takes out all the generators around town, so there's no power all around town, so everybody is staying at this kind of old hunting hotel lodge thing, and so it's very much like, it's very Clue, like all these different personalities all shoved into one place. Agatha Christie. I think I saw people on Letterboxd kind of comparing it to Knives Out, which is rude because it's not. Knives Out is actually good. But then it kind of comes, along the way, somebody determines, well, one of the people here has to be a werewolf because that's what's terrorizing this whole place. And so the rest of the movie is kind of who's the werewolf type situation. And outside of Sam Richardson, you have you got Milana Vintrub, who people probably know as the AT&T girl. She's fine. She's super hot. Good for her. Outside of that, it's a bunch of kind of UCB improv-y type people who you've probably seen as side or one-off characters in various sitcoms, TV shows, sitcoms, or indie movies over the past decade. There's not, I don't know, this it's kind of, it can't really decide if it wants to be scary or be funny. It's not really either, because it's not really a scary movie, and then it's not necessarily funny. It's just kind of one of those, I don't know, I get tired of these movies where it's like, let's just improv, or like let's kind of script the improv to a degree.
So explain to me, so the game Werewolf, I've not played the VR game, but the game Werewolf, the whole point of that game is to put you in the context of a situation that may be actually in a movie or a book, like a kind of murder mystery sort of thing, right? So isn't adapting that into a game that gets adapted into a movie, isn't that just bringing it full circle and it's just a regular mystery game, like mystery movie?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. The whole thing's kind of who's the werewolf.
And that seems like it would have less interest if you don't have a sense of agency inside of it.
Yeah, because that's what's fun. That's what's fun with it, is it's a very basic mystery, but that you get to participate in.
And that it is taking your established dynamics with the friends you're playing it with into account. Like, it's a social deduction game. You have to be able to read your friends.
Well, it's kind of like that, except you don't know any of the people and you're not involved.
So kind of like a regular mystery movie, regular whodunit.
Yeah, it's the whodunit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like Knives Out.
It's kind of whatever. It's not that great.
Is Sam Richardson in it doing kind of his normal shtick, like his Veep character, basically?
Yeah, he kind of does his thing, and he's fine. It's not his fault.
I think he's pretty funny, but
yeah, no, I like Sam Richardson. I mean, this is no baby of the year, but it's still, he's still entertaining. There's no Bart Harley Jarvis in this one. But anyway, werewolves among us. Werewolves within.
They should have done that. Just throw them all together.
Werewolves within.
Man, I just had a sad thought, which is how many years until there is an Among Us movie? I feel like that's
the question
happen.
is, will
bet you
how many legs does Among Us have? Will it exist as a phenomenon?
How many legs?
I don't know.
What's
the does Among Us have enough legs to make it to movie production thing, or is it going to be like a fad?
I think the Angry Birds movie came out after the fad was over.
This isn't real.
I bet there's already an Among Us movie in production, or
this isn't real though. I'm calling bullshit on this.
What?
Yeah, this isn't real. This isn't real. This is made up. That's fake. Somebody had one where it was Among Us coming in 2023. That's not real. That's fake. You're a liar.
It's from a fan
wiki
wiki thing.
Idea Wiki fandom.
You besmirched the name of Idea Wiki fandom.
No, it looks like, I guess at one point there was a fake rumor going around that Netflix was making an Among Us movie, but that's
Wouldn't
not
that
true.
be an amazing premise for the release of an Among Us movie, though? Is if the Among Us movie is actually just fake and we have to figure out how it's fake.
Well, this fake movie had it being directed by Kenneth Branagh, so
That'd be
Oh my
amazing.
god.
That sounds just fake enough
It's
to be
directed
real.
by Kenneth Branagh and written by James Wan. So that's when I was just like, this isn't real.
Both of those directors will attach themselves to fucking anything. Yeah.
Just like after Belfast, he had to do one for the studio.
He did do one for the He did the Nile, the other Perot movie.
That was before Belfast, though. He's still paying his dues.
Oh, well, he's making another Perot movie, so he's got a trilogy, that thing.
This is basically an Among Us movie, then.
In a way.
See if we can get Perot in a spaceship.
It's it's an Among Us movie for the olds,
The
all
boomer
right.
Among Us.
Let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back talking about Wendell and Wild in part 2.
Mama gave this warrior child a name to stand out in the crowd. We all got 15 minutes to do this shit.
Yeah, we're back with part 2 of episode 428 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be concluding our young horror for kids series with 2022.
Young critics watch horror for kids.
Yeah, young viewers watch.
Yeah, it's. I'll figure it out eventually. Wendell and Wild 22.
Old men watch kids' movies.
Wendell and Wild, directed by Henry Selick, from a script by Selick and Jordan Peele. The film stars Peele, Keegan-Michael Key, Lyric Ross, Angela Bassett, Ving Rhames, and James Hong. The two devious demon brothers, Wendell and Wild, have to face their arch enemy with the help of the nun Sister Helly, who is notorious for expelling demons. However, the brothers are not only plagued by her, but also by her. What? That's not the plot at all. No, it's Kat. Kat, she summons her two demons, Wendell and Wild, and then they spread mayhem on this town that's trying to be turned into a private prison. There you go. Henry Selick's admiration for Key and Peele's sketch comedy series led to their involvement with the film, with Peele taking an active role as producer and co-writer, emphasizing the subversive horror comedy ethos with people of color that he's established through his Monkey Paw Productions label. In an interview with the AV Club, Selick said, "The original story was mine from 20 years ago. It was inspired by my grown sons. When they were little and acting badly, I drew them as demons. I wrote a 7-page story, and the movie that was grown from that with huge input from Jordan is still based on that. I'm actually really good at visual gags, coming up with visual humor, and it's something we in animation are kind of known for. But I'm wide open to what the rest of the input is. I chose to make the demons look like Key and Peele, and I felt like, in a way, it would be like back on the show. Key and Peele were able to play any gender, any age, any situation, totally transform themselves, and I felt like, well, this will be an even bigger transformation." For animation supervisors Michael Lamont and Jeff Riley, both who worked with Leica, this reunion with Selick was a DIY-like departure from Coraline, with a smaller crew working in a more confined studio space. For Wendell and Wild, they embraced a rougher, more handmade style of stop motion, in which maintaining the 2D look of the concept art was encouraged by Selick, as was retaining the seam lines on the puppet faces. Another one of Selick's 2D-inspired ideas involved the souls doomed to ride the Scream Fair's torturous attractions. To achieve the desired cutout animation look, the puppets were made out of tin and then coated with silicone and affixed with magnets and bolts for a flowing, ripply effect. Quote, "I worked out an animation cycle of them rippling," Riley said. "We 3D scanned it and then printed out hundreds of replacement cycles for the small ones in groups and wide shots, which were about an inch tall. They were super fragile because they were so small." After Coraline, Selick felt stop-motion animation had become so smooth that it had become indistinguishable from computer animation, defeating some of the purpose of stop-motion. He decided to allow flaws such as keeping the seam lines on replacement faces visible and shooting fewer frames per second in some scenes. Except for a stop-motion software called Dragon Frame, he used more or less the same types of tools and techniques he used in Coraline more than a decade earlier. On working together again, Keegan-Michael Key said to Entertainment Weekly, quote, "It's like you had a dance partner for years and years and years. You come back, learn a new routine, but then you know you're not going to do the routine again for another 5 months. It's like riding a bike feeling. When you spend that much time with somebody, especially a person that you lived with, we lived together for 4 months when we first started our career together at Mad TV. There's a real connection, and there are times when it gets downright symbiotic. It was just locking those pieces in again." In a review this year, Variety said Wendell and Wild actually has a few things to say about teenage grief, the privatization of prisons, and raising your parents from the dead, but mostly it's content to fly off in all elegantly cracked directions. The LA Times said Wendell and Wild has the telltale Selick look, the distended character designs, the expressionistic lighting, and the willingness to let the puppets resemble puppets, and the movements to be a little choppy, to underline the handmade quality. There are distinctively quirky touches throughout, like Kat's love of Afro-punk music, her bond with a crafty nun, and her wary friendship with several private school classmates who at first appear to be snobs but actually prove brave and helpful. For Selick, animation is never just about making pictures move. It's about giving his images a beating heart, alive with the possibility that the weak can be strong, the grotesque can be good, and that nothing dies forever. And the New York Times said, why not try to resurrect the dead, collect some demons in glass jars, or summon a pair of demon brothers from among the souls of the danged? These seem like the ingredients for a wicked fun time, but the devilish new stop-motion horror comedy from Netflix, Wendell and Wild, can't get these pieces to double, toil and trouble into a cohesive dish of entertainment. On that note, let's talk about Wendell and Wild.
Have you guys seen the Key and Peele like church ladies skit?
I'm gonna.
Remember the Key and Peele church ladies skit where they like are destroying the devil? That was my initial thought watching this.
I'm gonna start, Andrew, you and Reid, since you all technically caught the first ever screening of this movie at TIFF. So,
Reid, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, like that does kind of sum up like the hype, and I think Andrew and I fell kind of on different sides of that hype, as not to speak for him. But to like preface, I've cooled a little bit on the movie. I really loved it when we saw it at TIFF, and I mean, like as festivals can do sometimes, you get a little like too into it. But I do still really, really like it. And I see the flaws like mentioned in the article Zach talks about in the reviews, in your intro. But in the end, like I was really taken with the visuals and like just and all the effort that goes into that. Like, I mean, it's definitely one of those movies where like the effort's on the screen, for better or worse, but I think it's still entertaining through all that. And then I also think the emotional arc of Kat, of the main character, is like really touching and fulfilling, and like I really enjoyed being a part of that journey. I was surprised that the movie wasn't as much about Key and Peele as I thought it would be. Like, it's their characters. Like, their characters are kind of side characters in the movie, to an extent. But I love just the idea of her as a teenager. It's a little, like, Inside Out-y, honestly, in a lot of ways. But, like, as a teenager, just having to, like, deal with the more complicated, like, the demons inside her, those emotions, as well as the positive things, and use all of that to, like, fully like realize who she is as a person, as like teenagers have to do. Like, emotions are complex, like life is complex. This movie is very complex, as I know we'll probably get into. But I did really enjoy it, even though I've cooled on it a bit. But I'll pass it over to Andrew.
Yeah, I was really expecting to love this movie. I think that on paper, everything I knew about it on the front end, and even some things I learned about it when the movie like started at TIFF, made it seem like a movie that was just designed in a lab for me to be obsessed with it. Right? It's the next movie by the director of Coraline. He hasn't made anything since Coraline. That is a movie that I have often referred to as my favorite movie. It's him working with Jordan Peele, who has done such great things. It's the reunion of Key and Peele. It's stop motion. It's about demons, and it's also about like the school to prison pipeline, which is a brave thing for a kids movie to be about.
To say Andrew was on the hype train prior to seeing this at TIFF is an understatement.
And like,
Yeah,
I
you
think-
were much more
I
hyped
think
for it
that
than I was,
it's-
actually.
you know, it would be maybe expected for me to dislike it just because I have hyped it up so much, and like nothing could ever live up to that expectation in my head of what this movie could be, right? But now that I've had a couple months at this point, or over a month, to sit on it and a chance to rewatch it, I feel pretty validated in my initial feeling, which is that this movie feels like a pretty big disappointment. There are things about it that I like. There are things about it that are charming. I really like, little intricacies of the animation, like the way that, when she walks into her room, like the radiator is doing this like little wavy motion, and I like a lot of the textures of the world of the danged. But this story just doesn't feel like it's done justice. Every individual element of it is interesting, but there's so many of them that they crowd each other out. And I don't feel that sense of emotional catharsis for Kat, because I feel like her character sort of gets lost along the way. In the same way that Key and Peele's characters get lost along the way. Like, just nobody gets enough screen time. It doesn't feel like this lived-in world with real stakes. Everything feels like a schematic for this larger theme that Henry Selick is trying to get across about capitalism and industry and the prison industrial complex and stuff. But like, and that's cool. Like, I'm all for Henry Selick kind of getting really ambitious and radical with his political ideas of his movies. But it feels like it comes at expense of the actual movie to me. And I guess one thing that I like about Coraline is that it's so kind of open and ambiguous, and this movie feels very literal, like it is insistent on wanting to spell out all of its ideas for you. But maybe that's more of a Jordan Peele thing than a Henry Selick thing. I don't know.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm like that, like your description of there's a lot of interesting things going on that all try to convolute into one sounds like Jordan Peele's Nope. Because I'm like, that just seems like what Jordan Peele's been doing lately, where he has all these different fascinating ideas that he kind of wants to get into and then tries to get into them all at once, and then it just kind of convolutes everything. I think my how I felt about this movie didn't take a giant dive, but dipped a little bit on the second viewing. I do think, like there are these really fascinating elements. Like you mentioned, the school to prison pipeline is such a fascinating topic to get into in like a children's, in a children's movie. You have this whole thing about the decay of American towns, and like the loss of, black owned businesses leading the towns, which is kind of interesting. You have a little bit of religion and capitalism in there, dipped in there a little bit. But yeah, you kind of have all these different things all firing at once, and you never really are like, quite honestly, you could have taken, one or two of those and just kind of run with it. But the bad thing is that it also doesn't leave enough time to really flesh out the world of the souls of the danged, the world of the danged, and kind of like get into that kind of wicked, demonic kind of level, because that also is kind of super fascinating. Because to Reid's point, Key and Peele are really fun when they're together, because they're just kind of riffing off of stuff and doing, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily scripted. It's more just them kind of talking in a room for the most part. But those moments are a little bit few and far between, because then it kind of gets stuck into some plot stuff. But at the same time, it's such a, as I talked about last week with Nightmare Before Christmas, there's something about stop motion animated films that I'll give kind of a pass to, just because, especially with Henry Selick, like the intricacy of like the world, of how it's textured, of how things move, and how things, like the motion of things, is so fascinating, but also just so like you can just feel the hands and the efforts on everything. And so I think, while, I need a tighter script and a better story, the like care and dedication of just like the craft of doing stop motion animation, like I'm much more willing to give that, like a stop motion movie, a pass compared to like a live action movie or a computer animated movie, just because I'm just like, yeah, they're putting in way more work than you would on something else. So I'm still positive on this movie, but I also don't like not see the points that you bring up, Andrew. Michael?
I liked it. This was my first time seeing it. I did not attend TIFF, and I watched it on Netflix, like the majority of people will, I guess. And I liked it. I feel exactly the same way about Andrew in terms of like the screenplay and story. Like, I did not feel very connected, like, or invested in what was happening in terms of like dramatics. But I didn't care that much about that. I mean, it would have made the movie better had I been, but I was pleased enough with just like existing in like this, world. I just really like Henry Selick stop motion films, even like, and they're all kind of, to varying degrees, they're all kind of problematic on screenplay levels, with the exception of Coraline. Coraline is like the one that sticks out as his most cohesive film and his most patient film. Like, it's very slow and not zany compared to like literally all of the other films that I've seen of his, which I like all of them. But like Nightmare Before Christmas, like, works okay as a story, but it's got a lot of stuff going on, right? And it's very zany and very like throwing things at you all the time because it's got all these visual ideas. And James and the Giant Peach is very kooky and basically doesn't work, I don't think, as a movie.
It doesn't really have much of a plot.
It doesn't. It's just like, hey, we're on a peach and stop motion and there's mechanical sharks and stuff. We're on a peach. It's giant. And then Monkey Bone, which is like his weird like live action hybrid movie, which I guess James and the Giant Peach is kind of too, but this is more so live action. Like, again, that movie doesn't work at all on a screenplay level, and I don't really like that movie because it's barely stop motion. I think that I just really am into the specific aesthetic that Henry Selick brings. We were talking off mic in between these episodes that he often has these like really big name collaborators like Tim Burton or Jordan Peele or someone like that. And I think that in all of those movies, you can see kind of the hallmarks of his collaborators. But when you look at his body as a whole, there is like a very cohesive element of like how the stop motion works in all of those movies. Like these really kind of angular, like impossible looking characters. The way that they move around is very like springy and kind of sharp and abrupt, even for stop motion. This kind of like macabre and gross sense of like visual gags, and I just love all that stuff. Like, for instance, the beginning of this movie shows the death of Kat's parents, and the reason that happened is like a very Henry Selick way of it happening, which is that they've been at a carnival and Kat takes a bite out of a candied apple, and this like worm, this double-headed worm like just pops out of the apple, and she screams, and it like distracts her parents from the road, and they crash and die. And it's kind of it's meant to be sad, but like it's got that very Henry Selick thing of, first of all, you have this grotesque creature just like kind of springing up in a way is kind of geometrically impossible in terms of like, how is this thing in the apple? It's like gross and off-putting, but it's also I don't know, there's just something really mesmerizing about it. Like, I think the worm has like a hat on or something like that. Like, it's kind of fun. I don't know. I just really like that stuff. And I think that like, as we've seen like computer animation become like the primary mode that like American animation works, with maybe like a side like undercurrent of like anime's influence. What's been kind of slowly lost from American feature animation is this kind of zany Looney Tunes-esque quality that used to be like very central to like American animation's DNA. And I think Henry Selick carries that forward in a way that is reminiscent of like kind of old shorts and cartoons and that sort of thing, but also like very specifically his, because of that, the very distinctive character designs and the very distinctive like sense of humor that is blended in with the kind of like visual gags. And I don't know, I just like existing in a movie that's like that.
I think a great example of just a character design that is like very Henry Selick, but also is, you know, communicating things about the character and is like humorous and amusing and kind of macabre, is the design of the nuns, who they refer to as the penguins.
Yes, yes, I love that.
Like come up to the girl's like waistline basically, and one of them has just this like really pointy face, like just kind of hunched over as like this one shape. Is just incredible design.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, like the fact that the visuals are so intricate, it further complicates it, right? So like all of, like maybe thematically, who knows what if Henry Selick was trying to comment too much thematically on religion, but he wanted to like make the nuns this way because whether he thought it was funny or interesting or like the way he sees them, like, you know, I feel like he's very visuals first in this movie, which is maybe where a lot of the flaws come from, and Jordan Peele's very like big ideas first, like details later. So I don't know. I just like, there's so many visuals that I just really love. Like the roller coaster, I think is hilarious. All the Time in Hell is really funny. I think, which is a lot of the Key and Peele stuff. And then the climax, I think, is visually interesting, although it's like probably the messiest part of the movie. But I just, if it didn't have like the super interesting visuals that like maybe I'm giving it more of a pass on too, and like the emotional catharsis that like I feel watching it for Kat's character, then I would probably be fully with you, because the plot is like wild, or just like overly complex.
The visuals are kind of there are multiple modes that they work in too, which is kind of I mean, it can be even more what's the word I'm looking for here?
Disheveled.
It sort of like unbalances you a little bit, because that's not the word I'm looking for. But anyways, like when the movie opens, we're in Kat's youth, and the style of the character designs is more simplistic than it is for most of the movie, right? Because we're sort of seeing the world through a child's eyes. And then after her parents die, we get this very, very brief vignette of like her like childhood post parents' death in short form, and that is depicted as like this almost CG looking like silhouette space. And then we jump to the World of the Danged, which is different visually from both of those things, and everything looks like it's made out of folded paper. And then we jump into Kat in the modern day, which is something closer to what we're used to as like the Henry Selick house style from Coraline, but it is doing the like Anomalisa thing of like letting the seams show, and like you can see where the characters' faces have been kind of like stapled together. And it jumps back and forth between a couple of those modes many times. Destabilizing is the word I was looking for. Like the whole movie seems like kind of visually unstable, in the same way that it's like narratively unstable. And if I wanted to be like really generous to the movie, I would say that that's like a point to its credit, that like all this kind of I don't know, mishmashiness of the movie is by design. But I don't know that that is actually a feature on the script level.
I dig it. I dig it though. I dig that. Like the whole movie feels like teetering. Like it makes sense that, like Zach was talking about, that Henry Selick like intentionally didn't use like the full spectrum of animation technology available to him, and I think that the movie feels like as a like better for that, because it, I don't know, the whole thing has this like woozy feeling, and there are parts of it where it really comes together really well. Like for instance, all the people who are raised from the dead like are constantly like falling to pieces and having to be like put back together and stuff, or like the dude, his eye keeps like rolling and he's gotta like whack his head and like the eye will spin around and like come back. Like the feeling that like the characters are kind of like in this constant state of flux of how tightly sewn together are they. I don't know, like I dig that style. Like I think it just looks cool.
I also, you know, emotionally, like in terms of the beats of the story, this one I think reminded me more of the movie that followed it, like a Paranorman, more than Coraline. You know, it's kind of a movie that's trying to I think kind of reach this emotional catharsis. You even think of like the scene late in the movie where Kat is kind of having to fight like her own internal demon. You know, it feels very similar.
Oh, there's that world too.
Yeah. And just that whole sequence reminds me a little bit of how they animate the Norman and the girl sequence at the kind of climactic sequence of that movie. But that one, I think, just kind of is able to thread the different storylines a little bit more fluidly together. I think that's just like, honestly, it's not like a complete wash. Like I just kind of feel like there's like little threads of the script that you just need to kind of tie together more. Like, you know, that's what's difficult, because it's like, you know, getting into like private prisons and stuff is a very like complicated, convoluted issue that has that like is like it affects a web of different things. But I'm like, because of that, you could connect to all these things by the one thing, and I think it tries to kind of, it just doesn't as fluidly do that as I feel like it probably could have.
There's I think the scene where she fights like this manifestation of her childhood trauma is a really good example of where the visual, like what the movie's doing visually and what the movie's doing narratively, seem to be like at odds with one another, because she like the rules for like how any of this stuff works is not established, right? What exactly a Hell Maiden is, and what exactly that like hand bite thing that she has is, and what exactly the nun who kind of like takes her under her wing, like what her story and relationship to all this stuff is. Like all that stuff is a little unclear. What is this like redemption room that she takes Kat to, right? But it visually looks cool, and like you can get into it on that level. But then when Kat gets like sucked into the wall, and is like ready to, you know, actually make contact with her childhood self, then the movie cuts away and we see something else happen. I even forget what it is now, because the movie like feels like it doesn't have like a logical sequence in my brain. And then eventually we cut back and she's like in that interior space, kind of like when Coraline gets sucked into the mirror world, and like she talks to the souls of these children who've been eaten by the beldam in that movie. And like by the time we're back there, I think we'd spent so much time on the other scene that I'd forgotten what was happening with Kat over here. Like I just keep sort of losing the immersion and the flow, like being in a flow state with this movie. Because I'm constantly having to be like, oh, who are these people again? Like, how does this connect to all these other things? And I felt that less on a rewatch, but I still felt pretty like disoriented regularly by it.
Yeah, I just wish, because I think I really responded to a lot of like what it's trying to tell through the story. I also really responded to Kat as a character. Like she's just really cool. She's super cool. Like I just think of that. I remember like I kind of just got this like jolt of excitement when she first gets to the school and she like, you know, cuts up the uniform that they wear and then like rolls out with the boots blaring like the punk music with the giant boom box, and it's just like walking through the hall. Like it's like I just kind of like the energy that the voice actress Lyric Ross brings to that character. If that's what kind of bums me out, that, you know, they just kind of introduce like a little bit of just kind of too many people, you know, and it kind of, again, it shadows her, it shadows the Wendell Wild. I mean, I think that kind of it's a. Yeah, I don't know if this if it's a. I feel, no offense to Jordan Peele, I feel like it's more of a Jordan Peele issue where it's just kind of like throwing all the darts at the wall at once.
It seems to be an increasingly Jordan Peele issue.
In your intro,
I would be curious because in your intro, Henry Selick mentioned that like this was like an existing story treatment that Peele came in collaborated with, and I am curious. I mean, we've speculated, you know, okay, like a lot of these ideas, you know, maybe have come from Jordan Peele or whatever. But I'm curious, like, you know, what that initial movie would have looked like without like collaboration from Jordan Peele. Because I guess I always feel like that Henry Selick is more interested in like kind of zany like carnival movies than he is with like ideas in terms of like screenplay dramatic ideas.
Yeah, because none of his other movies have like a thematic point they're coming to, really. Like you can draw conclusions from Coraline, but it's not really leading you there in a really
but even that
way.
is an adaptation of a fairly tight Neil Gaiman novella, and it's fairly faithful to the Neil Gaiman novella, so it has like that kind of structural backbone that Henry Selick, I know for a fact that Henry Selick didn't bring to that movie because he's taking it from the book. But like this movie, I don't know, like I can imagine a movie that's not too different, but that doesn't even gesture towards some of these bigger ideas. And so it's not as bothersome that like it's not connecting these ideas because the movie itself exists in this kind of just bizarro land like state where we're just like, I don't know. I think about like, Mad God, a movie that Andrew and I watched earlier this year, which is directed by Phil Tippett, like a special effects guy. And like there is like this kind of maddening sense that everything has import, while at the same time, most of the movie is just like, oh, and here's another crazy, gross thing. And you're just watching that like over and over again. And like, I don't know, there's something about the world of stop motion that kind of invites these like weird, messy movies where they're not always very well suited to like these kind of like cohesive, like literary analyses. And I don't know if it's like, there's something about the production style, but I think about like, I don't know, like even like, I mean, Aardman is more grounded than Henry Selick, but like even those movies, like the Shaun the Sheep movie or like the Wallace and Gromit stuff, like those are always more interested in like the kind of like in the moment like gags or interesting like design choices than they are with like a story that we care about. Even though like those movies I think are more successful at making a story we care about than this. I don't know, like I kind of love that the world of stop motion has maintained this scruffiness because it's never been commercially successful enough to have like a kind of like totemic like Disneyfication of it, right? Like it's never really been a gentrified like medium like CGI is, or like I mean cell animation is kind of a weird state now too, but like cell animation at least has like it's like respectability. Like a lot of cell animation, if someone's going to go out of their way to do cell animation now, it's going to be something like a cartoon saloon movie, which I like, but it is a kind of like a stately affair.
Yeah, there's like a prestige attached
yeah,
to it.
Whereas these like stop motion still just feels like weirdos are at it, and I don't know. This is a
Yeah.
movie that is just a weirdo,
True.
like a movie for weirdos, like made by weirdos, and I don't know. I guess it doesn't. I guess I'm like wrapping around to the point I originally made, which is that like the narrative stuff doesn't really bother me because I'm just like, this movie's strange. This is not a movie that feels like could have been made in any other medium.
Also, I think like in terms of like horror for children, I think I really appreciate that this movie like takes kids seriously and that they could like have some access to these ideas and not just like sometimes animated movies take kids seriously in terms of like emotions and stuff like that, but this one is like literally like complex sociological ideas.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe putting them forward. I mean, maybe not enough, but maybe like putting them forward so like kids could consider and like kids could be smart enough to do that. Which like reminds another movie we talked about earlier. Like I think Turning Red does the same thing with like some like very specific like adult perceived things, and takes kids seriously in that way, and I think is successful. And I think I just like appreciated that aspect of it as well. Because I have a hard time. I think I don't watch like enough actual like adult geared animation to where most of the time when I watch an animated movie, I'm still like perceiving it like for a child, if that makes sense. Like I'm still like wondering what a kid's gonna perceive from or like get from this movie or see here.
Yeah, we have this movie in our horror for kids lineup. I guess because it's so associated with, another filmmaker who has made multiple horrors for kids. But it is PG-13, and it is the one movie that Henry Selick has made that feels like it is pitching intellectually above most kids' levels. But I like the idea that he wants kids to engage with those ideas anyway. Michael, I'm curious, like as the one kid haver on the podcast, like how old do you feel like Jarvis would need to be for you to show him this movie?
I don't know. That's a good question. Because as we were beginning this discussion, you were talking about all the ways that narratively it bothered you. And like, I agree that it is like not narratively cohesive. I was curious what an actual child would have thought about this movie. And it is, I don't know, like I remember my grandparents had the VHS of James and the Giant Peach, and I watched that movie a lot when I was visiting them. I was a little older than Jarvis is right now. I was like 8 or 9 probably when I was doing that. And that feels like a good cutoff, like upper elementary, like maybe a little later. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, I was saying like, I wonder how a kid would react to this because like, if you watch a lot of kids movies, I mean, they're either one of two things for the most part. One is they are like slavishly formulaic, like with like, storytelling tropes, and like you can see the first 5 minutes of the movie and you know how it's going to unfold. The other kind of kids movie that is really common is the kids movie that feels like it is just like pasted together from different ideas. And like a lot of the early Disney movies, for instance, are kind of like that, like Dumbo or like Alice in Wonderland or even Bambi to an extent, like feels like there is a sequence of things that they knew that they wanted to include in the movie, and they just kind of paste them all together without a lot of regard to how do these things make a cohesive whole. And in terms of that, like Jarvis, who is 3, my son, is fine with that. Like he's kind of like a in the moment kind of person. I don't know when that kind of larger like narrative consciousness grows in like a child, like, and when they start thinking about like that this movie builds toward things and that sort of thing. But I don't know, like it is interesting. To answer your question, Andrew, I feel like that this is a movie that is probably made for people around the age of the protagonist or maybe a few years younger, if I had to guess. Like it kind of feels like that. And I'm just thinking about the cultural signifiers here. Like it takes place in a school, but a school that is like, it's a boarding school, but it's old enough for kids who have like been into juvenile detention, and like she's listening to punk rock music, and that's not like inherently like age gated. But when I think about the kind of music that children are interested in, like, you know, abrasive punk music is not like what it's, you know, it's no Halloween, like This Is Halloween, you know, that sort of stuff. Like, I don't know, like everything about this movie signals that it's not interested in courting the interests of like very little kids. But I don't know. It does. It's kind of grotesque, like in gruesome in points, but it's mostly just like grotesque in how it's designed, and that feels of a piece with like James and the Giant Peach or something like that. I'm rambling, but this feels like a person who in another age would be starting to get into the Hot Topic kind of movie, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas is a Hot Topic staple.
Right,
all over
for
the
sure.
place.
But that's a movie that I think has like a broad like age range, right? Like because it's doing like very broad like holiday stuff. Like Jarvis knows who Santa Claus is. Jarvis knows what Halloween is.
Jarvis
so he
is a
could
genius.
piece together what that movie was going on. That's right. Yeah, Jarvis.
He doesn't know what a private prison is.
No, I don't think he even knows what a prison is at all. If I asked him, I don't know what he would say.
Yeah, why doesn't Jarvis know what a private prison is? It's about that time.
Yeah, it's time to rip off the Band-Aid with regards to the carceral.
He can't be going through life any longer, you know, not knowing how the school to prison pipeline works.
For sure, yeah. He's got to learn about the carceral state somehow. Maybe Paw Patrol is like a good like door into that.
Don't even get, dude. I don't want to talk about Paw Patrol. I show up with friends with kids who are watching Paw Patrol, and I'm like, there's so much wrong here that I just want to.
I've never actually watched the show. Jarvis doesn't have access to the show, but he has a couple of toys, and it makes me a little bit. I feel weird about it for sure.
You should. It's a weird ass show. That's. I don't want to get into it. That's. I'm not going to get.
Every parent whose child watches Paw Patrol is legally obligated to show them Wendell
to
Wild.
like counterbalance.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to text my friends with children and be like, you got to watch this thing. Your children are not old enough, but I don't care. They need to learn about the school to prison pipeline since they're learning about private cops.
You know how there was a...
The Paw Patrol is private?
I'll tell you after the episode. We're not going to include this in the...
Yeah.
All right.
That made me think.
Sorry,
you know how there's like
point.
there was that Shaun the Sheep show on Nickelodeon. Like
I'm aware that there was a series.
Yeah. I mean I watched it. I guess I was maybe too old. Who knows? I have no recollection. But Wendell and Wild would be a great show. Just like a 20-minute episode of the demons.
It would. Oh my gosh! Like the truest Letterboxd review I have seen of this movie is another movie that wants to be a TV show. And like I think these characters are so interesting, and this world is so interesting, and like these like conflicts are so complex that like they just need room to breathe. Like, and you know, maybe that's untenable just because stop motion animation is so arduous to make that you couldn't make a whole TV show at like the caliber of animation that Henry Selick is working on.
They're about to start
here.
charging us for sharing accounts. So,
but man, Netflix got money.
Yeah,
Netflix.
They think they're going to charge
give
us
Henry
for
Selick all the
sharing
money.
accounts.
Are they? Yeah.
So pretty much what we're saying is pirate Netflix and pirate Disney Plus.
Yeah.
that's right.
So you can watch Lightyear and Wendell and Wild.
If you take one thing away, that and that Paw Patrol is propaganda that you should not keep away from your children. All right. Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we list the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Cinematary. Whether it's $1, $5, or $10, we appreciate the patronage. Thank you to our patrons, Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsati, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. We thank you so much for supporting the show. Next week, we're going to be kicking off our next series, which is a quick dive into some of the works of Ernst Lubitsch, who
Lubing it up.
we're gonna lube it up, guys.
That's why it's so quick.
Looks like, yeah. No notes. So we're gonna kick it off with "I Don't Want to Be a Man," which right now is just me. So that's I won't think about that one too deeply. The Smiling Lieutenant, The Shop Around the Corner, To Be or Not to Be, and Clooney Brown. So we're gonna get some nice Lubitsch action. But until
Don't sleep on Clooney Brown, people. The movie is a masterpiece.
don't sleep. And with that, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.